to our pod. And by that, I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. Right now, we are ba-dum-bum in the year of the Dresden, and we are covering the first 11 chapters of Death Masks.
And would I ever look up how many chapters we're supposed to cover, or how many chapters are in the book?
Would Laura ever do simple math? No, she did.
Can I ever figure out how many chapters are in an audiobook? Absolutely not.
You can't click on that button to have it and scroll down.
Nope, apparently not.
Because she did text me yesterday. She was like, how many chapters are we covering? And I'm like, 11.
I don't know if like the Libby app though, I'm trying to remember, because some books in the Libby app, if they have just like chapter titles, they don't say like chapter 1, 2, or whatever.
Would love to help you out on this, but I also read it on Libby, and so I can tell you that they do.
You did the audiobook as well?
Yeah, well, yeah, because I had to go behind the scenes. Hannah had to go get her dress fitted, and she was running behind on recording, and so I downloaded it on Libby so I could drive the hour and a half to go get my dress altered at the place I bought it, and I had to skip all the way to chapter 8 because I had read up until chapter 8. And so I knew that I could scroll through and pick which chapter I was on.
Well, then I have no excuses. I just don't like to divide.
But the problem is but the best part is you tried. Like, you tried to make up an excuse for why.
I mean, I will say that is actually a thing, because another book that I have been reading on Libby as an audiobook for just a buddy read, that one does not have chapter like 1, 2, or 3. It has titles. And so
that
like my friend will say, did you read chapter 3? And I would say, is that the one that's this name? Because I think so.
And they say,
did this happen yet?
Would you remember the name of the chapter? Well, then we're both lost. Okay.
Do you remember this character appearing?
Oh, God. What do you think? You're better than me? But Laura, what are you reading, watching, and or enjoying?
So, Hannah, I am part of SPIFBO X, SPIFBO 10. I'm a judge for Team Before We Go blog.
Very important, people.
No, not at all. I am part of Team Before We Go blog. Absolutely wonderful people on the team. So much fun to interact with on Discord and everything. Let me just preface this. I'm going to talk about a SPIFBO book that I reviewed, and you can check out the review on Before We Go blog's website.
Check out Laura there.
Yeah, but I'm just going to preface this with, these views are entirely my own and do not reflect the entire Before We Go blog SPIFBO team. Okay, so that's out of the way. These are my own personal opinions, but I read and reviewed semi-finalist in SPIFBO X, Quaint Creatures by Andrew D. Meredith. Super cute book. Super cute. It's about Legends and Latte fans come out of the woodwork right now, because you will like this book a lot. It's about a man named Norik Softstep, who is a giant, and he's a former like dungeon inspector and currently a veterinarian and owner of a pet shop called Quaint Creatures, which has like all these adorable magical creatures that are so cute. And there's all these like different rooms and nooks and crannies where there's like, you look over here and there's like panda tars, and you look over here and there's sheeple, literally sheep that like people. It's the cutest things, and it's absolutely adorable. But Norik gets drawn into like investigating the trafficking of some magical creatures, and he has to figure out what's going on, and it's a super cute story. I do think that the mystery element added some stakes to the book, because if there were not this element, I think it might have just fallen a little flat. So I was appreciative that the author did think to include like, yeah, this can't all just be like happy fun times. This is also cute. Look at these adorable little panda tars. So I did appreciate that there were some stakes, because even in cozy books, there do need to be some kind of plot and moving forward of a story.
I was going to ask that. How many cozy fantasies have you read?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
but generally I enjoy
You
them.
get a
Like,
C on this pop quiz.
yeah, I'm unsure. Like, somebody recently asked me, like, oh, how many epic fantasy have you read? I'm like, I have no idea. I read quite a bit of fantasy, though, I feel like. But I do feel like I am generally a big fan of cozy fantasy in particular. Like, it has to be quite bad for me to not enjoy it. So I'm probably definitely the target audience for quaint creatures, and I found it super adorable. I found it very wholesome. I also just really appreciated like all of the characters in this were non-human. Like
Oh,
even like
good.
the people who were like running the store, and also like Norik and his wife have an adorable relationship and excellent communication, and it's not one of those like, uh-oh, there's their relationship is in jeopardy type situations. It's like they communicate well, they have a stable relationship. You're not worried about like, uh-oh, it feels like they're going to break up now. It's like, no, they're adults who can communicate with each other and can solve problems, but they're honest with each other. And like, this is great representation in a fantasy story that's quite short, actually. It's a quick read. And I just really thought that Meredith did a great job kind of tying all of these elements together and making it a fun story with some stakes, but at the same time, just enough magic to like satisfy fantasy readers, but at the same
Okay.
time, probably draw in some people who are not super into fantasy. I feel like cozy fantasy already does that, but this book definitely feels like if you like Legends and Lattes, if you like Miss Percy's Pocket Guide, if you trying to think of some other, obviously I haven't read that many cozy fantasies because I can't even name more than two.
I was just wondering because I know like cozy fantasy, we've heard about it on a couple different episodes with like different authors. It's kind of
I
blowing up
think
right
the
now.
vibes are different. Like people
Okay.
consider The Hobbit to be cozy fantasy. So I think it kind of depends on what your definition of cozy fantasy is. I also am starting to kind of like turn away from some of these like subgenres. I don't feel that they're super necessary, honestly. It kind of like makes me think of like when we had Martha Wells on the podcast last year when she was just kind of like, it doesn't make sense. They're all fantasy. Like they're all
It's
fantasy.
all otherworldly. It all
Yeah, like
matters.
it's
Yeah.
fine. And there's been a lot of discussions online too about like how science fiction and fantasy were always just SFF. They were
Right.
never separated out, and now they've become separated out, and there's all these subgenres for science fiction as well. So I think I would also just kind of like to get back to
Pull
basics
away.
a little bit and not have to like categorize everything to the nth degree like we tend to have to do now. And I
What a
feel
way
like
to
that's
tell
definitely a
me
thing
you
that's
don't
been
want to.
happening.
What a way to tell me you do not want to answer my question.
I don't
I was
know the
like,
answer to your question. I don't know how many I've read that are cozy fantasy.
you're like, I
It'd
don't
take
want to
me a while
answer
to
it.
it'll take me a while to go back and look. I have no idea.
Can I tell you that I frequently quote the Arrested Development quote, I do not understand the question and I will not respond to it. I think about that quote all the time. And that was kind of the energy you were giving me when you were like, I think we should pull away from the genres. It's like, I do not understand the question and I
I
will
do
not
think that's
respond to it.
actually like a real thing though, that there's too
Oh
many
yeah.
subcategories for things when it's just like we have epic fantasy, we have high fantasy, we have cozy fantasy, we have all these different things. It's just like, can't they just all be in the same genre and we don't have to like categorize and then recategorize and then recategorize because we have things that are fitting into multiple
Yeah.
subcategories and everything. And at that point, it's just like, okay, who cares? Uh, but getting back to quaint creatures, very, very adorable. I also just really liked the city of Brightfall where this takes place because it's a magical world, but you really just kind of feel like you're there in it. It's
Yeah.
the imagery is really really great. So I would recommend this to people who specifically like the slower versions of fantasy that are not like extremely high stakes, you know, that like we talked about with Travis Baldree, that these are not like major stakes. It's kind
Right.
of everyday day-to-day things that people would encounter, but takes place in a magical world and is fun, and I think we get a lot of heart in this book as well. And I think Meredith does a really good job writing this. And
Good.
also is the narrator of the audiobook. So if you're interested in checking that out, I've heard that
Oh,
he's a great narrator as well. So
nice.
that's an option for all you audiobook fans out there. So yeah, Quaint Creatures, really liked it, really liked it. And again, just my personal opinion, not reflective of the team. But
I
it's a
was gonna make a
semifinalist.
joke, but I know that I shouldn't make a joke. I was gonna be the like renegade, like it is the entire team's perspective. You
Actually,
can
I
quote
am,
me on that.
yeah, I am the voice of this review.
Laura is the entire before we
I
go
am,
blog.
yeah, absolutely not, absolutely not. But also check out a lot of the
Bobby
Team Before We Go
Newport.
blog work that they have done. Really great stuff over there if you haven't checked them out. Beth Tabler's super nice, and Dr. John Morrow is doing a lot of reviews
Wow.
for Spiffbo and doing a lot of work there. So definitely check out a lot of the things that they've put up and check out their blog in general because it's really fun and a lot of stuff for if you're into grimdark or horror or science fiction fantasy, definitely the place to go.
Good.
Hannah, the other thing that I've really been enjoying, I talked to you about it, and then I've been talking to people about it on Blue Sky and uh getting all sorts of tips on like what other things to start playing. I've been playing Wingspan
Oh yeah, you have
by
been.
Stonemaier Games, and I want to become like a board game hobbyist. Like that's
Oh my
my new
gosh.
goal. And so
Well,
I
you are
really
coming to my house and I do house one of those.
I really
So,
like to play board games and I've been looking for things that like are more like fresh
mhm.
and things that like me and my husband can play together, but I was also looking for games that I could do a solo
Okay.
version of, and Wingspan was one of them that was like recommended in a lot of lists.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm also a bird watcher, so I probably would like Wingspan. So my husband got it for me for my birthday, and we've been playing it quite a bit recently, and we're both getting really into it. And I've noticed that we're starting to get better because our scores are getting higher, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But we really enjoy it, and I've also noticed like it's fun just the two of us playing it because I feel like he and I are both willing to take more risks because it's
Hmm.
like there's not other people around who will judge us if we keep all of our bird cards and then have to get rid of all of our food tokens. But it's just a fun game where you have all these bird cards and you're trying to develop habitats
Hmm.
and you're trying to develop like a unique habitat that is diverse. And
Yeah.
the goal is to be able to feed your birds and to have them lay eggs and to grow within this habitat. And then you're also given like bonus cards that you're told, like, okay, you're an ecologist, so your goal is to have this many birds that lay eggs in nests or what
Hmm.
have you. And so you get additional points for that. You get points for how many birds you're able to put in your habitat, how many eggs your birds lay on their cards, how many cards you're able to tuck away, etc. But we've been really liking it. And I was talking to people on Blue Sky. I was like, yeah, we played it for 3 hours one night. We just really enjoyed it because we would be done and we'd be like, you want to
But
just go
another
again?
game.
And we're like, yes. So we played it for a really long time, but it's a lot of fun. And so I was talking to people on Blue Sky and asking like, what other games have I missed out on? Because I'm like, this one obviously is extremely popular. It's on all sorts of lists where people are like,
Hmm.
get Wingspan. It's super
Yeah.
fun. And so next up on like my list of some to check out are like Everdell. People have mentioned
Everdell
that
is
one
really good.
a
Yeah.
couple times, and that one also like I'm very much into like the cutesy type stuff like that.
Yeah.
I I really like that. But I had another one on here that let me just pull this up because I did save all of the suggestions in a list because I was like, this is going to be something that I just look into all of these games that people tell me about. But Villainous was mentioned quite a bit too.
I've played
Small World,
Villainous.
Cascadia, Flamecraft, and then Guild of Merchant Explorers. Those
Okay.
were all mentioned. But
I've played Villainous. I don't think I've played any of the other ones. So, so guys, secret of Hannah. I think I probably talked about it on this podcast. I was raised in a board game family, but like a very specific board game family where,
mhm.
my mom was one of 13 children and all of her siblings were board game people, but my mom was not a board game person. But like all of my family events surrounded playing board games in such a weird way where now I am marrying a board game person and he had to teach me that like if you play board games, it doesn't mean you have to play them all day. Sometimes you can just play a board game and walk away. And that was mind blowing to me. Like I've never had an experience where you just play a game and you walk away. It's always been an all day event. You're sitting
Eh,
down and you're going to play like 8 games.
I will also say, like, growing up, I feel like my family also played board games, but it was also kind of an event where we would like have over my
Mhm.
aunts and cousins and my grandma, and we would all play multiple board games in a night.
Yes.
And it was like, if it wasn't a scheduled thing like that, we were not playing board games. We were
Yeah.
not. Like, my parents would play Uno with me and my
Okay.
sister,
Yeah.
or
Definitely
like
Uno.
Mancala, but we would not play anything else besides like Mancala and Uno, really.
Yeah.
And so, like, playing board games, just like the two of us, me and my husband, it's been a lot of fun. And we really just like how low key Wingspan is,
Yeah.
where it's like he and I can just be like, okay, well, we just ate dinner. Do you want to just play around a Wingspan before we go to bed? And also, we can keep track of like if you wanted to stop and be like, oh, we're too tired to finish
Hmm.
this game, we can stop in a round. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we really appreciate like the laid back nature of it, where it's very much like there's no yelling, there is strategy,
Yeah.
obviously, but it's not one of those things where we're like super freaking out about like, oh, guess this or do that, quick move
Right.
over here. And so I really want to get more games kind of along those lines, things that are good for like 1 to 2 people
Hmm.
or more, in case we want to have friends over or something, or play with like my parents or his parents. But we really have fun with Wingspan. And I'm especially interested if any of our listeners have any suggestions for like solo player games.
Hmm.
I specifically would be very interested in solo player games. If you have any recs, hit me up. I've, like I said, I've been keeping a list of all the games that people were recommending to me on Blue Sky. And so I've got all of them on here, and I'm going to check out all of them. I might not buy all of them right away. That's
No.
expensive, but like
Yeah,
I'm
they board games are
that
expensive.
that's very expensive. But I do think I'd like to add a few more board games and start maybe kind of collecting them and playing them more,
Yeah.
because it's like, yeah, this is something that's easy for the two of us to do. And especially if it's a game where we can like do a gameplay in like 45 minutes or
Hmm.
even an hour, that's perfect for us. So
You know
if you
what?
have any recs, hit me up.
No board game I like. I
What
like
one?
the game Splendor.
Splendor? Have you
Hmm.
played Sleeping Gods?
I have not played Sleeping Gods, no.
Someone also recommended that. That one looks like right up my alley as
Okay.
well. And then Ticket to Ride Europe
I
was
Ticket it.
mentioned,
Yeah, Ticket to Ride is a good
but
one.
this specifically Europe for whatever reason.
Not America,
That
okay?
one apparently the design is better for the Europe
Interesting.
version,
Well, go
which I was
figure.
like, okay, you go. People
So
knowing
my
this about the expansion packs and the different versions of games.
So funny story about Ticket to Ride. My fiance Paul was playing with my little nephew, who I love, but he is competitive because my
Mhm.
family raises competitive board game playing
Players. Yeah.
nightmares. Which is why I don't always play board games because I'm a sore
Mhm.
loser and I know this about myself. It's really hard. Because either I'm way too intense or I have like tapped out completely and I can't find the happy medium between the
Mhm.
two. And it is most of everyone in my family who does that. So my nephew was playing Ticket to Ride with Paul, and my nephew was 7 at the time.
Mhm.
And Paul was like, well, I'm not going to let him win, but like anytime he asks whose turn it is, I'll say it's his turn. Like it was his own internal, like, we can do this. Well, my
Just like keep
nephew
track.
is incredibly smart and picked up on it. Instead of being like, well, I'm going to take the higher road and like win the correct way, he just
Uh-oh.
started repeatedly asking whose turn it was because he picked up on the pattern of what my fiance was doing and just like wiped the floor with him because Paul couldn't let it go. So that is a Ticket to Ride story for you. Paul, not a sore loser. Hannah, very much a sore loser.
Can I just shout out some of these other suggestions that I
Oh
got?
yeah, I'm sorry. I
No,
talked
you're
over you
totally
because
fine. You're
you're on
totally fine.
something. You're on a topic that I have a lot of hidden knowledge on, but I don't get to talk
You're
about very
totally
much.
fine. I get just like excited about these things because like when I'm new into something, I'm just like I need to figure out everything about it. I don't
Hmm.
know why I'm like that, but just some of the other recs that people gave me were Galaxy Trucker, Heat, Pandemic, Red November. A couple of those I had heard of, and then the apparently creator of Wyrmspan their spouse messaged me and was like, "Oh yeah, Apiary and
Oh, that's
Wyrmspan,
fun.
and then also there's a new game called Undergrove about mushroom tree nutrient exchange." And I was like, "Oh, I know tons of people who would love that."
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Dominion. Have you
I
played
love
Dominion? Okay,
my family was a huge Dominion family. We have like 8 of the games, and we also have a binder that my family created where they took all of these suggested mix and matches and put them into a binder because Dominion is like you buy expansion packs
hmm
and you can mix and match. And so I have an entire binder of recommended mix and match games that work out well for everyone. So
perfect.
Dominion is up there for us.
And then some of the final ones were Fungi, Takedo Duo, Lost Cities, Beer and Bread, Seven Wonders Duel, and J.R.R.
So,
So,
Laura, there is a board game store up near me. So when you come visit,
uh,
we'll have to take a little trip instead of our usual bookstore. We can go
yes,
see some board games. And I think they have like gameplay stuff there, so you could play a board
perfect.
game while you're there.
That would
So
be
we'll have to do
amazing.
that.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do that. I know when I was
Um,
on vacation recently, there was a like not totally gaming, but they had a lot of games there, a store. And so I went in and I found this it's Mexican Dominoes is what it's
oh,
called literally. And we always called it like Mexican train
yeah.
dominoes. Like my husband's family introduced me to the game and it's a lot of fun. We used to play it with his grandparents
Oh,
quite a
that's
bit and
cute.
I was having a hard time finding it. Like you could get it on Amazon, but I wasn't ever seeing it in stores anywhere. And so when we were on vacation, I saw it. And I texted my husband. I was like, "Should I just get this?" And he was like, "Absolutely, get it." So we'll probably play that one soon too. And that one's just a dominoes game, so very straightforward, but a lot of fun. But Hannah, what have you been reading, watching, and or enjoying?
I don't know if I would say I enjoyed this, but for
Oh no.
reading, I read a book club book called The Age of Magical Overthinking Notes on Modern Irrationality by Amanda Montell.
This is the one that Hannah mentioned to me, and I was like, you could not tell me that, like, if I looked at this book, I would not have guessed that it was a nonfiction.
So it has like a very psychedelic front cover. Both her books do. So she got big writing this book. She is a linguist by nature, and she wrote this book called Cultish. And it's kind of about how like everything is a cult, from like
Fair.
cults to CrossFit. And she just kind of went
Mhm.
on a thing about like, oh yeah, definitely. And it was about the language of fanaticism and how like if you look at the language of like these fanatical things that you become, it becomes cultish, you know?
I just read an article actually about how someone was talking about how having fans is okay, but fandoms are
Yes.
toxic. And I was like,
Well,
what an interesting
also
topic.
NPR just said that there was a study done that having fandoms is actually it usually has happier people in it because people like to seek community. And
hmm
if you're part of a fandom, you have a community in ways that we have lost with people who don't go to church as often
hmm
and do those things. So, like, we have these fandoms instead of like community building aspects. So, it
But be
has
careful with
happier
Star
people.
Wars fandoms.
Yes, I mean, it's happier people, but are they healthier? That is the
Be,
question.
be careful, Star Wars
Um,
fans.
and so she wrote this like cultish book, which I heard was very good. And then she had like a podcast out of it. And then she wrote this book. And this book,
And then this. Okay.
it was not for me. I like our biggest thing was like, I don't think it was about an age of magical overthinking.
Mhm.
I think it was about notes on modern irrationality. And it
Okay.
was all kind of like half baked. So in the first chapter, she kind of talks about like fandoms and like Taylor Swift and like how people become obsessed with her and like put all these ideals into her. And I was like, okay. And then it kind of goes
Fair.
into like a it kind of starts becoming like a very social sciency like Psych 101 lecture about like here's what cognitive biases are. Here's what confirmation bias is. And let me tell you about something that reminds me of this topic. And it just didn't work for me. Like the best parts about the novel were, or nonfiction, the book, sorry, the best parts about the book were she goes into like a deep dive into a relationship she had right out of college with her best friend's 30-year-old brother and like how it continued. And like she linked that to like the sunk fallacy cost of like, well, I had already been with him for years. The good times were good, da da da. Da. And so I just had a hard time leaving him. And then when I finally did, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But then she just bounces around from topic to topic, and there doesn't seem to be a clear thesis anymore. It just seems like
Mm,
random things she likes to think about.
mm.
And I honestly like
I
couldn't
mean, can
care
relate,
less.
but
Yeah, but like at the same time, I'm just like, okay, but I don't want to read your book on psychology. Like, I don't want to read
like,
the book
wasn't
I
there like
would
a
write on
fluid thought to
psychology.
this? Like,
Right. And like she's not a mental health professional. So it
right.
felt a little weird to like, this is what this topic means, and this is how I view it in the world. I'm like, but you're not someone I need to learn
You're not
that
an
from.
expert, right?
You're just like, and she kind of got a little bit high on her own horse. Like it felt
Mm.
incredibly judgmental, where
Oh.
she talks about like her first writing job was for a fashion magazine. And so she worked there for like 5 years. And she talks about like, well, I did everything. I did the lip plumping, the spray tan, and I was miserable the whole time and I never wanted to do it. And I'm like, okay, but like you could start discussing like the connection with this job and you working for it and like what sounds like you're not so great relationship. And it sounds
Yeah.
like you were doing those things at the same time because it's your first writing job and your first relationship as an adult. So
Hmm.
likely they happened concurrently. And so you could have some self-reflection of like the power that having internal beauty gave you during a moment you weren't good, or like why
Hmm.
you were so susceptible to that type of job and lifestyle when you weren't feeling good about yourself. And it
Hmm.
just felt like none of that happened. It was just like, yeah, all those people are pretty vapid. And I'm like, well, that's not helpful information.
Right.
Like it just feels like she has,
Something that she didn't like. And
yeah, and it feels like she had a lot of stuff to say, but like didn't, but she's already said it all. Like she already said it in the Cultish book. She already said it
yeah.
in her podcast. So reading about it didn't feel very like worthwhile to me, especially since I didn't read the first book, which I heard is much better. I'm like, well,
Oh,
I don't really care about reading the first book now. Like,
yeah, you're done. Like,
yeah,
mm,
I'm over it. I don't really like this. So I really didn't like it. And then apparently like I tuned out for the final chapter. And I guess she doesn't even have like concluding thoughts. It's just like a final
oh,
essay and she's done. And so I'm like, well, you didn't even
interesting.
have. So there are certain books that I've found where like people who've gotten big in like podcasts or like Instagram or things like that, they'll write a book and it has like a really good tagline. And then I'll read it and I'll
Mhm.
be like, that wasn't really what your book was about. It's just more of the same stuff that you said before. And I thought part of it was a little bit like, she talks a lot in the first section about how sh like the people in LA are obsessed with like zodiac signs and thing and like Mercury in retrograde and they're trying to go get like uh, you know massages and doing all these different types of things to make them healthier, but like, and she totally tried to buy into that for a while and it just didn't work. She had to go to therapy. That's the whole point. And all I could think was like, wow, that's a really like
But it does
West.
work for some people.
Exactly. That was, and I was like, that's a very Western view. Like people in Eastern cultures do believe, and like she talked about how white women are often more susceptible to like jumping in full force to that. And I'm like, okay, but where's the nuanced conversation between like Eastern cultures who actually base their practices on their like beliefs and their history and everything that's come
Hmm.
before them? It works for them because of those things, and white women are using bastardized versions to like make themselves feel better and more like different than all the other Western type people. And it's like,
Hmm.
you can't, you, and she didn't really talk about that. And my book club was like, oh, she does talk about stuff like that in like her other book and on her podcast. So like, I bet she just expects you to know that. I'm like, but you know how I would know that if you mentioned it in the book and you didn't? Like, you just talked about
Yeah.
how Eastern style practices are all kind of bullshit. And like it's the same way I feel about like people who bring up religion. Like I'm not super religious, but like if it's not hurting someone, why
Sure.
pass judgment on stuff? You know, and that's my thing of
Mhm.
like, yeah, talk about how women, like white women, can bastardize these types of things. Talk about that. But like,
But then
don't ignore
don't
the
do
good
that.
things.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
like you're ignoring all of the good reasons to follow that. And like, I like zodiac signs.
Hmm.
So like I'm sure people could be like, well, it's because Hannah likes them. But I'm like, well, I don't use them to tell my future. Like, but it is nice to have a reason sometimes when you're in a bad mood to be like, oh, like the world. And I'm like, oh, but like the world has magnets in it and it has all these different things. So like if that does have an effect on people, who am I to say that it's not true? Like it just
Sure.
felt very like I'm right and the whole everyone who believes in this is wrong. And I didn't like that.
Do you think that as a current like society, we are a little too quick to give book deals to people who have like their 15 minutes of fame? Like
Yes.
I really have noticed that happening a lot recently. Like somebody blows up on TikTok and then we
Hmm.
need them everywhere. And
Yes.
then they're either having like some kind of shutdown or we're talking about
Hmm.
like oh the fall of this person or can you believe we never hear from this person anymore? It's like, yeah, because we went over the top hearing about them for the longest time and then expected the world out of them when in reality this was just somebody who initially came online to try and like just share a story that happened with them. Like I'm specifically thinking of like Elise Myers, how
Yeah.
Elise became huge, still is huge. And I'm not saying anything negative about Elise. I'm just saying that it's like all of a sudden it was like Elise was everywhere. And then there was a lot of criticism of Elise and uh, to the point that Elise got offline. I'm not going to get into that because I don't know all the details of it. I just know
Right.
that she took a hiatus. But it seems like I've noticed people from Love is Blind getting
Hmm.
book deals and stuff, and it's like, so they say like a one line thing that resonates with people, and then all of a sudden we need podcasts, we need book deals, we need them in a million other shows, we need all sorts of things from them, and they expect like really profound messages, and these people think they're giving really profound messages because they maybe gave one during
Yeah.
the moment that they really clicked with people, but going on
I
from then there, it's like,
I also
are
think
these the
there
people we need to hear these things from? I don't know.
I also think there's a weird thing of like, obviously people should be knowledgeable. I'm not saying that, but like we expect people who have become very huge on these platforms to be fully formed, fully realized people who have knowledge of everything. And it's
Exactly. And it's
like,
like
that's
a
not
lot of
true.
these people are just regular humans that like they not everyone can be expected to have a medical degree, also be a lawyer and then be an engineer and know also about like all the trips to NASA that have ever or all the trips from NASA to the moon that have ever occurred. Like I'm sorry, it's you're just expecting too much out of people to be extremely like well versed in all these different topics and
Right.
to I don't know, I just think it's a lot when it's just like a lot of people are just regular humans that made a TikTok where they're pointing out something or they're trying to spread some positivity and we're going a little overboard with the consumption of it. And I don't know if this is just like a social media in the moment that we're in, where we see a bit of something and we're like, I need more of that. We need that dopamine hit of whatever it was. And so we need to recreate that moment. And we keep trying to do that with the same person and it just doesn't work or
Well, and
what it is.
I do think there's a little bit of like we've become more w- we've gotten an insight into people that we've never had before. Like people talk about that
Mhm.
with like how there are no movie stars the way there were in the 90s and early 2000s, like a George Clooney. There's no
Like the
George Clooney.
untouchable type.
But like also that's because now stars who are coming up, you are expected to see the inside of their lives. Like George Clooney is not giving you a window into his life. He is
Yep.
living a very private life. You don't like I recently was thinking about something where I was like, is Kevin Costner a libertarian? Like I just had a moment where I
Mm.
was like, what is his political affiliation? And then I looked it up and they were like, well, he's kind of like a never Trumper Republican, but he's also voted for Democrats. And I'm like, that's fine. But like we expect people to be like, you have to say something about this. You have to do something
Yeah.
about this. We have to have an open window into people's lives. And I feel like sometimes with people who blow up on TikTok, they are also expected to do that in ways where like
Yeah.
you and I have this platform that reaches, tens of people, like, uh, But
Kim
like,
Kardashian's listening right now.
yes, she's listening. But you and I also like don't share our last name. We don't share
Hmm.
where we work. And like, if we ever got big, I could see where people would be like, well, we have a right to know these things. And it's like, well, you don't have a right to know
No,
those
nobody has a
things.
right
Like,
to know personal information about people.
I like, yeah, I have like you don't
But
need to know the ins of my life.
I also just feel like the expectations that we set on people,
Hmm.
celebrities included, are
Yeah.
very high and hard to meet. But then we have these moments like you're talking about, Hannah, with this book where we've put a lot of expectations into this person who maybe had like a couple of good sound bites and some good points, and then we're wanting to replicate this again and again and again. And it's like, but is this someone we need to hear about this from, or did they already get their point across and we should have just moved on and we're just dragging this out too much from a person who likely is not that well informed on the topic and we should just ask like a psychologist.
Right. Especially when it's stuff like this, like someone who I think kind of knows what they're doing is like Jamie Loftus. Like she does different
Jamie is an
little
investigative journalist,
she's
so
an
that's
investigative
different.
journalist. So she investigates and she like, but she talks to experts who say what they need to say. And then she's like,
Yes.
okay, well, here are my thoughts on what I've learned from this. And this felt like someone who was like, I'm also an investigative journalist, but here's
But an
my
expert.
assessment. Yeah. And I'm like, but you're not like, I wouldn't come talk to us about certain things, like
Yeah. Well, and
you
this
and
is something
I,
I'm gonna say something that's gonna make me sound like a total boomer. Like people are be like, "Oh, what an old-fashioned view." But I am very tired of like everyone thinking that they are an expert in a field because they've done one thing or read one article or something. Like, I'm sorry, like I can do something. I can run a 5K, but there's no way I can't really. That's a bad example.
I'm sorry, I
I
just started laughing because I was like, no, you can't. Like,
I can
not
walk a
offense,
5K,
but okay, you
but
can walk a
I
5K.
can exercise and walk a 5K. And I can do that, but that doesn't mean that I'm like an expert in physiology or exercise science. Like, I'm sorry, no, I'm not. Or like I can eat a salad every single day this week. That does not make me a dietitian and does not make me
Right.
qualified to give advice to other people. And I think that a lot of people now they do research and they find things that work for them and
Right.
they think that that makes them an expert
Hmm.
and that it must work for other people. I'm sorry, but not everyone works the exact same way. Hannah and I have very different styles and things that work for us, and we're not
I don't
going to
know.
just cookie cutter our experiences to each other. Like I'm
I only cookie cutter. I only ask you to do things the exact way I do that. No.
and I take it exactly as you say it because you're an expert. But but you know what I'm talking about, Hannah, where
Right.
people like they'll I'm thinking specifically about like diet and food
Yes.
culture where people figure out something that works for them and they're like, this is what you should do. Start with this, then
Oh
do this. And
God.
it's like, I'm sorry, but you're not a dietitian. You're not a medical professional. You're not qualified to give advice on something. And I know that's a very like old fashioned, I'm sure there's people that are
I
going to
don't know
listen
if
to
it's
me
an
say
old
this and be
fashioned
like, that's an
view.
old fashioned view. Like people can become experts or whatever. And I'm
Okay,
not
but
saying
like
that people
that's not
can't
what you're
learn and do
saying.
research, but the way that people kind of just like assume that they are credible sources in things and they're not. And it's not just diet and exercise. That's just the example because it's very prevalent online.
Yes.
But there's a lot of other things where I feel like people just jump to assuming that they are an expert because they've found something that works or they've had people connect with something they've said. And it's like, but you're actually not an expert on this.
There's also the problem of people who like want to teach someone by being like, this worked for me. I'm an expert, so I can now tell you what to do. And
Hmm.
that just like doesn't like I've even had moments where because we're on the topic of like food and diet, like I've had one of my sisters be like, oh, I started listening to this dietitian who says a lot of the same stuff you do. And I'm like, yeah, that's because I researched and I did a lot of work on myself to learn those things. But also, it's not up for me to be like, well, you should have been listening to me the whole time. I'm like, yeah, I'm one person who researched and found out some stuff that I found interesting for my own personal relationship
Yeah,
with food. That doesn't mean I get to school my sister into being force
absolutely.
fed what I learned. Like, either it's not fully accurate, or I'm not an expert, or the person who I'm telling that to is not ready to hear it yet. There are a
Mhm.
multitude of reasons people learn things at a different pace. And I think
Or
if
it
we
might
were a
not
little
work
bit
for
more,
that person too. When you're thinking of
yeah,
things that specifically like could be catered to one person or one group, they might not always work for another person.
right,
So you could have a negative experience coming out of something like that, especially when you're talking about food or exercise, I feel
right.
like. Because there are different forms of exercise that are better suited for certain people and
Hmm.
certain conditions, and certain diets that are better
Yeah.
suited for certain people conditions. So, like when I see like a bunch of people that are like, you have to do this diet, it's like, I don't know that that's the best way to go about these things, and to just assume that because it works well for you that it will work well for the next person. And it's especially like hits home for me when it's like I'm somebody who deals with chronic illness,
Right.
to have people say like, well, you should be doing this, 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 and this, and that's what will help it. And it's because you're
Gloria,
not
you
doing all
just
of
need
these
to eat
things.
more pasta.
Exactly. Well, people make those comments to you
I
when you
know.
have chronic illness, you mention this or that to them, and they're like, "Well, you should do this or that," and it worked for me. And it's like, "Yes, but you also don't have any chronic illnesses, so
Right.
how would you know that it would work for me?" And also, no, it won't.
As future
But
VP might say, mind your own damn business.
rule of the golden rule, mind your
Yes.
own damn business. But yeah, I do think there's just it sounds like this woman is very much living in the time of like she became popular through different avenues, and now has been considered an expert, maybe even considers herself a bit of an expert now too, where she's feeling willing to dole out advice and expertise on these things. And it's like, but this comes off as a little judgmental and maybe almost doing some of the things that you were criticizing.
Yes, exactly. So that was something. And then for watching, I haven't been watching that much recently. Taskmaster as always. But I haven't like been in a TV kick recently. But I did start watching the final season of Umbrella Academy. I won't get
Okay,
too much
I
into it because
haven't watched any of it, so don't spoil a
I'm
bunch.
only 2.5 episodes in. I will say I
Okay.
really like the way it looks at recovery and addiction.
Okay.
I think there are certain things that happen on TV that sometimes you see it and you're like, wow, that's a really good representation. And I would say there's a scene in this season that is similar to one that, not similar in like plotting or similar, but similar in the feeling I got from it. To Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, when Rebecca
Okay.
is in her downward spiral and she wants to leave, and her friends are kind of bringing to bear all the things she's done recently,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
she lashes out at every single one of them in such a like a painful
Really
way.
cruel. Yeah.
And I thought Crazy Ex-Girlfriend really did well with like she hurt people, but a lot of times it was other people who were taking care of the people she hurt afterwards, saying
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, she said those things. That was not who she is. And that, like, she was in a bad place and she knew how to take you to
Mm-hmm.
task. And I think,
Well, she in that moment she used very like personal details, like things that either people had confided in her or that she
mhm,
had recognized in these people, which made it
yes.
especially hurtful.
Which
Okay,
is
so
also something that happens with people with addiction, is a lot of times they see the worst parts of people because they see it in themselves as well. And
mhm,
so I think there are certain things that if you are in a bad place, you could use, if you're someone who has like suffered with addiction, against people and like use it as a weapon. And like I think she did that in those moments. And whenever I see those, I'm like, wow, that's a really eye-opening moment of what can
mhm.
happen. And I would say that there are similar things that happen and this season that like I got scared of on how some things happen, and then all of a sudden like it shifted perspectives and I was like, oh, like that's so it's so interesting to see this. And I really
Okay.
liked that. So um I think it's a little bit rushed so far. Again, 2.5 episodes in. That means I'm only got 3.5 left. And I do
Hmm.
think this season was a little bit like rushed
Oh,
because
there's
they
not even
knew.
8 episodes?
No, it's only 6 episodes.
Oh,
So
lame.
yeah, I know. And so I think there are parts that I really like, and then there are parts that I'm like, yeah, it's a little rushed. I don't know. It just feels like it's not going to stick the landing the way we want to. But I also think like season one is such a perfect season of television.
Yeah.
And then it did a lot of weird stuff. And so like this is what you're left with, is a lot of weird stuff.
It
Um,
seemed like everyone, well, I've seen a lot of people talking about it online. I've been trying to avoid spoilers, but people are sharing like the picture of like season one, and then below it, there's like a drawing of the horse's tail, and
Yeah.
then and butt, and then you go to the next picture, it's season two, and then it's like you continue into the midsection of the horse, and it's slightly not as good of a
Yeah.
drawing. And then you get into the front part of the horse, which is season four, and it's like a stick drawing that looks somewhat like a cat.
I
And
don't
I've seen
know
a
if
lot of people sharing that, and I'm like, I'm curious because this show, I think, definitely pushes the boundaries in
yes.
terms of like trying to get out there with ideas and creativity. So I can
Yes.
understand how it wouldn't work for all people, but at the same time, I feel like I'm going to be a little more
I'm a little
um
bit more forgiving because it's trying
forgiving.
something.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I do think it's trying something, and I see the way they built the motivations into the
Hmm.
characters throughout the years, and I think that that works. Um, I also think the one thing that I feel like the show never did enough for is poor
Luther.
no. Sorry. I don't care about Luther.
You don't care about
Um
Luther? He's so hot.
that big old dum dum, he's fine.
Tom
I
Holland is so beautiful.
He is so beautiful, but I always feel bad about like slight spoilers if you've never seen Umbrella Academy, but there is two different timelines for one of the characters. And I feel like they never did enough to like show how traumatic it has to be for the second timeline character. Like
Yeah,
he has so much trauma thrown on him in like the form of people treating him like he is a different
like
person.
yeah.
And it's like he's not him. Can we all have a moment where we all like say like you guys are the problem in this situation?
Hmm.
Like because it's not his fault. He's just existing. But other
Well,
than
and that actor
that,
is actually incredible too. So,
right. So he's so good, but he plays both parts really well. So
mhm.
been watching that and just listen. I started listening to Behind the Bastards podcast, so that's what.
Interesting.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was
How
a
do you
little
like
bit
it? I
curious.
a lot of it's super popular. A lot of people love that podcast.
I You and I met. We didn't meet him, but
We
he
didn't
was at
meet
a
him. We were
taping
very
of
close to
Bechtel.
him
We were,
brandishing a knife at a live Bechtel Cast podcast.
and an accidental knife got thrown off the stage.
Yeah.
And I didn't love his energy at the Bechtel
I
cast,
did
and
not
so
either. I was a little off put, honestly, by the whole knife thing.
I was a little bit like, I don't know what to expect. Honestly, 10 out of 10 podcast lore. Like he
Really?
is incredibly smart. I think he was very under the influence at that podcast taping.
Yeah, I
Uh,
also think that, but
and
it
so
was very, if you didn't know who he was, like I had no idea who this person was
yes.
when we're sitting at the Bechtelcast live recording and they bring him out and like people seemed genuinely excited that he was there, and so did Jamie and Caitlin, the hosts.
Yes.
And they were very much getting into it. But for somebody that's like, who the heck is this person?
Well,
I
especially at
was like,
a show that is meant
what?
for women. Like the Bechtel cast is a
It's a feminist
it's
podcast.
a feminist podcast. It mostly caters to women. They have gone on record that they have pulled back from having men on the podcast because like
Hmm.
it's just not worth it to them. So I
Hmm.
think with that, it was just a weird energy to meet.
And then he
Uh
brought a backpack full of weapons out because apparently
as a
he
bit.
collects knives.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was a bit, but I don't know, it didn't sit well with me. And I remember we were sitting at our table, like right in front of us was, gosh, I cannot
You're
even
wrong
remember.
about
Yes,
lady. Yeah.
you're wrong about,
Yeah.
um, the host of You're Wrong About podcast, which is a great podcast. I really like that one. Check it out totally. Especially if you want to hear about like random things in time that nobody knows enough things about. That's the perfect podcast. But I
It's
also
so
just
good.
remember her like turning around and being like, "How did you guys feel about that? Like, was that a little weird or was that just me?" And I was like, "Yeah, that
It
was
was weird.
weird." I
Laura had not listened to You're Wrong About yet, so she had to sit there with Veronica and I like fangirling because You're Wrong About.
I think I had listened to it. I just didn't
Okay.
know that that was her. Sarah Marshall
Oh,
is her
okay,
name.
Sarah Marshall. Okay, because I remember you like were sitting there and you were like, why don't you tell her you guys are a big fan? And we're like, not until after. Because we didn't want to ruin her night. Because like, I mean, she is a well-known podcaster, which means she's not like a
Mhm.
celebrity by any means. But I was like, I think both Veronica and I were both like, well, you don't want to like ruin someone's night by like leaning over and being like, we're huge fans. And then you have to sit next to each other during a podcast taping for like
I
another
love to
hour and a
ruin people's
half.
night by doing those type of things.
And so afterwards we said like, oh, we're big fans. Will you take a picture with? And she was like, yeah. And she was the chillest human being in the world and she was wonderful. But
But yeah, that Robert Evans experience, the like, and sh Sarah did a episode with the Bechtel cast right
yeah.
before Robert Evans came
Yes.
out, and that was on the Goonies because we saw it in Portland. So obviously the Goonies. But then they covered Hannah Montana with Robert Evans, and again, someone who I had never listened to before the Bastard or Behind, what is it, Behind the Bastards? Behind the Bastards
I
podcast.
think it's Behind the Bastard.
So Behind the Bastards podcast, I'd never listened to it. I had no idea who this, obviously I've still never listened to it. I had no idea who this man was. For him to just come out like with a backpack full of knives, I was just like, what the heck? That was really strange. So I'm glad that the podcast is good because I was honestly very off put by that experience and was like, yeah, I'll probably never check out that podcast.
So I totally agree with you 100%. And I was a little bit nervous about it. I was running out of Bechtelcast backlog. um, and I was like curious about it because everyone does rave about this. And so I finally was like, okay, well, I'll listen to it. And he does a lot of research. He does seem like a fascinating individual who's like very smart and very like,
I see a lot of his tweets on Twitter and I like those.
yeah. So I think maybe, again, no person is a monolith, no person is perfect. He probably came with the wrong energy for Hannah Montana Bechtelcast taping,
Yeah.
where it did, you could tell that he felt a little bit above it. And it's like, well, none of us are above Hannah Montana. We're all
No.
here to have a good time and laugh about bad movies. Um, but Laura and I are also people who will watch Madame Web live and tape our like notes on it. So, and
Yeah, I also feel like the vibe that I got from him too was very much like that as well, where it's just kind of like he came in a little hot and then also
yes,
just like I'm a little too smart for this almost. And even like the way that he interacted with some of the guests a little bit too was
yeah.
off-putting, that I was just like, you're not smarter than all
And
of
then he
us.
was
Like,
like,
don't talk down
he
to all of
almost
us.
doxed Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yeah.
And so it's stuff like that. But like his podcast is very good. No person is a monolith.
Yeah. And
But
again,
yeah,
that's
I
a
would actually,
one moment in time. So
yeah. I mean, I've been doing it chronologically, so I'm way back in uh
it started a long time ago, didn't it?
I'm way back in 2018.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and so it's mostly a background podcast. So I'm not like listening actively, but like I'm
Sure.
listening to an episode on the astrologer who gave advice to the Reagans and they listened to it. And I'm like, well, that
Excellent.
is fascinating. I'm glad I learned about this little factoid. Um, I always like when certain podcasts like a new fact hits you. Like I just learned
Mhm.
from 99% Invisible that wildfires are named after the closest street to where they think they started.
Oh, really?
Yeah, isn't that
That's kind
weird?
of sad too.
I know. Like, could you imagine? Like, oh, yeah,
Hmm.
thanks. Must be nice. That's where my house burnt down. Like, why would you pick
Yeah.
that?
I live on Sierra Street. We lost our home there. Like, oh,
Yeah, like the Sierra fire. And it's like,
like,
yeah,
oh.
that's just a bad memory now. So, yeah, just so you guys know, bummer. But that is what I've been reading, watching, and or enjoying. Shall we? Oh, and I beat Hollow Knight. No one cares, but I did
Finally,
beat Hollow Knight, and then I went
your
back
little
to.
dude is gone.
Well, I had to go back and try to win it a different way because I didn't
Oh,
like how it ended for the little man. So I haven't
oh,
fully finished, but I've finished at least one time, and I'm trying to finish another way to see if
okay.
there's any way out of a situation for him. But
Okay.
Laura, you can always get a Nintendo Switch and then we can play Stardew Valley together and we could farm together. Not that
You
you
know
own
what?
a
I've
farm or
considered a
anything
couple
over.
times, like, oh, should I try to get into video games? And I'm just like, I think it's too far gone at this point. Like, I never played them. I think I would be bad at them, and I
Did you
don't
play
like to
them
be
in
bad at
like
things.
when you were a kid?
Just my Beauty and the Beast Game Boy.
Oh, just that's the only one. I feel
Hmm.
like you might like it, but I also went headfirst into Zelda, which is an interesting choice for your first game out. So, what are you
Yeah,
gonna
I just
do?
don't think I could do the controllers that well. I don't think that I would be good at it, and I think I would it'd be like this sounds bad, but I'm also one of those people where it's like I like to be good at things.
You and I
That's
should at least
such a
try it
stupid
when you
thing to
visit to just try for 5 minutes and we'll try to
we'll
pay
see.
something.
Yeah, I also just I don't know. I've never I guess felt like I was interested in it.
Hmm.
It's fine for other people. I just
Yeah,
don't think that it's
that's
my
fair.
jam. But
Um,
yeah, I don't know. And it also seems very expensive to get some of the
that
gaming
is
systems
very
and
true.
everything. And I'm like, should I invest in that or I could get
I
more goats?
did get a
Like,
free Nintendo Switch from my fiance, never using his, and
oh,
then I just used it.
perfect.
Yeah, I haven't spent any money on Nintendo Switches. I've just
I don't see
benefited from
myself coming
others.
across a free one, unfortunately.
That's
So,
fair. That's fair. But should we dive into
yes,
bum bum death masks?
I
Uh,
have a lot of notes because I still did not listen to your requirements of what chapter I should
oh,
read
you just
through.
kept
And I
going?
went farther.
Oh,
But let me just tell you, Hannah, like my husband has been listening. He listened to Summer Night and now he's listening to this one. He's a fan.
of course
Like
he is.
we were listening to Death Masks yesterday and he was really getting into it. And like if he'd have to leave the room or something, he'd be like, "Can you pause it real quick?" Sure, this is my homework, but I will pause it for you. Absolutely.
This is
And
my homework. I do need to finish it, but sure,
yeah.
you take your time.
But it was so funny because we were sitting there listening and he was getting like really into it, like laughing out loud at some of the moments. Like he's getting so into the characters. And then like during a couple of the action scenes, I look over at him because we were in the car at one point because this was a whole day event
Of
listening to
course. Well, he kept
this
having to
book.
take breaks.
Yeah. And so we're in the car at one point because we just we're like, let's go get ice cream. So we were in the car listening to this, and I look over at him, and he's like very serious, like throughout this action scene. And I was just like, he is so getting into this book. And I honestly have maybe more of a connection now to this book because I'm just like, this is kind of fun to me that my husband and I have been able to kind of share in these past two books, like
That's
Summer
fun.
Night and Death Masks, that he's actually starting to get into it now, where it's like, can we listen to that Dresden book?
Oh,
I am
and
so
play Wingspan, and you're like,
yeah, I'm like,
this is why
absolutely.
we're married.
Like living the dream, like absolutely. But I do think it's fun to connect over a book together. Like
Yeah,
there's certain books that he likes that I don't like as much and vice versa, but there's like a few that it's like we both are vibing with, and this has been a fun experience for Death Mask
oh
so far. And
good.
we have a little bit left to finish the book,
Oh
and
man.
obviously I had to wait because he was like, "Don't listen to it without me." So,
Can I ask a
listeners,
very
this is
important
what you've created,
question?
a monster. My husband loves the Dresden Files now.
Can I ask a very important question? Did you
Yes,
go to the local dairy place for ice
yes,
cream? What did
yes.
you get?
So I got a mint chocolate chip flurry, and so did he. We got the same thing
Mm,
because here's the thing. If I order something, my husband gets food envy, and then he'll be like, "Oh, I really should have got that." And so a lot of the times we will just get the same thing because he worries that if he doesn't get the same thing as me, he will
he'll
want
be
mine. And
upset.
I'm not very good about sharing my food.
Yeah.
I am very good about eating it all, but not
very, very good at
not
eating it
sharing
all.
it. So
So
yeah, we've
I
been
can tell
enjoying
you
death
that my
masks.
go-to order at that dairy place um is a chocolate sun or it's an ice cream sundae, vanilla with chocolate, marshmallow, whipped cream, and pecans. And it is
Okay, there's
amazing.
a couple of things on there. I don't like marshmallows too much, and I don't
So it's
like
not
whipped
marshmallows,
cream.
it's the marshmallow sauce. You put marshmallow
Okay,
sauce on it and
I
it's
probably still would not like
fantastic.
that. Is it like marshmallow
It's my
fluff?
favorite. It's like melted marshmallow. It's more like
Mm,
melty because it has to
I
be
don't
mixed
think
with
I
the
could
chocolate sauce.
do it, and I also don't like whipped cream. I just
You're wrong. So
I don't
sit
like
in your own
frosting either.
wrongness. Wow, we're gonna have to
No
go
on
on
no
Larry
on
Fowler
frosting,
to talk
no
about
on whipped
this.
cream.
I
Nope,
love frosting.
nope. Just
Um,
give me the plain cake. Like
oh,
don't
ew,
waste it.
that's disgusting.
It's not disgusting. It's just fine. But yeah, we're enjoying Summer Night and Death Mask so far, and I will keep you all posted because my husband has in fact jumped into the series at book 4.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're
And
supposed to
he's
do
keeping track of
apparently. So,
things.
okay, well, then he knows.
So,
So,
because I asked him, I was like, "Does this all make sense?" And he's like, "Yeah." So,
good. Okay. Well, it helps
we
that we get a
wondered.
breakdown because, like, most of the first 11 chapters are like, do
Yeah,
you remember this person? Do you remember
yeah.
this person? Do you remember this person?
Here's what you missed on Glee.
Yeah, here and the first person they ask us if we know is Morty, who was
Hmm.
the guy who was like the ghosts are rumbling Harry because Harry is on television.
Yes.
He's on Larry Fowler, which is supposed to be
Also, at the
Jerry
beginning of the
Springer.
audiobook, you have the audiobook, Hannah. It was like
I
total
didn't listen
vibes
to the
with like
beginning
the,
though.
oh, really? With like
I
the
had to
noir
start on chapter 8.
music and everything. Oh, yeah, that's right. You said that. With like
Yeah.
the noir music and everything. And it's very much like, well, here we are. The sepia
Larry
filter,
Fowler.
the sepia filter is lifting so we can see onto the stage and meet up with our old pal, Harry Dresden.
And Mort. And so Mort often goes on Larry Fowler because he likes to read
He's like
people's
a
stuff and make
medium.
money. He's a medium. And then Harry came on to talk specifically to Mort because there's a vampire war going on. And Mort is like, I'm
Mhm.
not talking to you. And so Harry's like, I'm gonna get on television with you, and then you can't hide from me.
But apparently Harry was on on this show in a previous appearance too.
Yes. But he never does very well. And he also has
No.
to sit there holding control because things explode
He's got a
television.
he's got
It does
a
not work
spell
well.
going so he doesn't like take out all of their equipment and
Yeah. And so Larry is like kind of mocking him, being like, "Oh, I heard you helped the Chicago PD." And Harry is like, "Look, Murph isn't doing too well. They don't like that I keep showing him up and stuff. So I gotta make sure they don't say that I help out with murder mysteries because that
Mhm.
won't look too good for Chicago." And then he pines a little bit over Susan. He gives us a little rundown of how Susan has disappeared recently. She hasn't been handing in her articles to the magazine that she worked at, The Arcane.
Which
And
he's like
so,
getting info from Mort
yes,
is
which is why
like
he's there.
why he's there because he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, where is she? You know, she's half vampire, not fully vampire yet." And
And that's why
he's
she had
sad
to run
about
away
it.
from him.
And
And she couldn't
apparently
accept
she's
his
in
proposal.
Peru.
Yeah. And he's like, "Well, I don't think she's dead. I just can't seem to track her down." And Harry's like, "I don't think that's good. I don't think that's good." And then Larry Fowler brings on two people, naysayers, and
Two
one
more
is
guests.
two guests. And Mort did call him out on it, where he was like, "Of course I'm a medium. That's how I know two more guests are coming
Ha
later."
ha ha ha.
And so the guests come out, and one is named Father Vincent from
It's from the Vatican.
Italia, and then one is Dr. Paulo Ortega from Peru.
He's from Brazil, I
Oh,
thought.
Brazil. I apologize. Yes, University of Brazil at Rio de Janeiro. Paulo Ortega is definitely of the Red Court.
Yeah, and
And
he's like, I've debunked so much paranormal stuff. Like, people would even say that I'm a vampire if they. And it's like, okay, well, how weird because you are a vampire.
well, the best place to do things is just hide it in the open.
Well, and then
Like,
he starts mentioning like all the things that have happened in previous books. Like, yeah, here's the thing. Like, you guys all thought that some paranormal activity was happening because frogs were falling from the sky. Here's what actually caused it: climate change. And like, just like starts literally coming up with excuses as to why these things couldn't be any kind of magical being at all.
mhm. And he like during this talk, Larry is like going on, and Harry gets a little upset. Larry and Harry, why does Jim Butcher do this to us?
All these
Uh,
names are too similar.
but Harry kind of slips up, and some cameras go haywire. And during this time, uh, Mr. Paolo, sing to me, Paolo, is like, my name is the Duke, and I came to give you a proposition. And he is like, I want to fight you in a duel where we actually have like parameters. And if you can get the White Council to agree, we have said that if you win, Chicago will be a neutral zone and there
Which
will
sounds
no
pretty
longer
good
be a
because
war.
Harry's like, okay, so
I don't
if
leave
this is a
Chicago
neutral
very often.
territory, then we're all pretty safe.
Like
So,
Harry, in the first book, you were out in the Ozarks. Like, have a
mhm.
bigger boundary. Like,
But also I
uh,
thought this was a good moment because Harry reveals like that he actually is pretty afraid of vampires and
yes.
that he doesn't trust them. And I appreciate that we're getting a little more of like that. um letting down of his personal shields, where he's being a little more vulnerable with us as readers, where he's like not all like, I'm just going to be some really self-deprecating guy that's never going to admit that I have any kind of flaws. And it's like, no, he's definitely got some fears and he actually is worried about this situation.
But also in the next breath, he's also like, I wish I could say I carefully weighed my options and I let the fear have me,
And
but
then he
really it
doesn't.
was just a cocksure decision I made. So what are you gonna do? And so he's like, yeah, I'll probably agree to this, get it in writing, and you've got a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so then a lot of magic happens and everything explodes and they can't continue on with the show because Jim Butcher is done with this scene.
He's basically just like, here's how we get an easy out. Harry's going
And
to
then
lose control of his spell and everything's going to break. So that
we
means we can
can't
all leave.
we can't smash cut to later. It's just gonna all explode. And
Hmm.
Larry Fowler's gonna be like, every time Dresden's on. And then Father Vincent is like, hey, I came on the show for a
Well, he follows him
reason.
to his car.
And Harry's like, you came to talk to me, didn't you? And he was like, yeah. And he's like, well, it's just been one of those nights. And so Father Vincent admits that something was stolen from him. And
Well,
he,
from the Vatican,
from
I
the Vatican.
believe.
Sorry, yes.
And
Something
he's
has been,
like, yeah, a local priest recommended you, Father Forthill. And I was like, oh, he's back. Okay.
yeah, guess what
I
that
thought he
means,
was still
Laura.
babysitting Michael's
I
kids,
mean,
but
he is
apparently
still
not.
babysitting Michael's children, and that's the whole point.
Uh,
And so Father Vincent is like, I don't believe in any of this magic mumbo jumbo, but I heard you're a crack shot at a detective, so I'm gonna hire you, even though you think you're a wizard.
mhm.
And Harry's like, well, as long as you pay, I don't really care
Yeah.
all that
He's
much.
like, standard fee, I'll take the case, but you have to cough it up.
But before they can talk a little bit more, a gunman suddenly pops out and starts shooting at Harry.
And then
And
Harry just like pulls a big shotgun out of his out of the beetle, and then they get in the car, and he's like, "Here, take this." And Father Vincent's like mortified.
it's like, why are you handing me a gun? And Harry's like whipping out of the garage and he's like, look, there's gonna be more guys down there. The other guy went running too fast. And he whips out and it looks like it's one of Marcone's men.
Yeah, Johnny
And
Marconi.
Johnny Marconi is rent thugs.
Well, he
And
calls him like
so
the Cujo or something like that.
and so they come like wheeling down the streets of the second city. And Father Vincent is like, okay, come to my motel and sit down. And so he kind of tells him what's going on about the theft from the Vatican. The police are involved, but he thinks that they're all corrupt because Chicago be corrupt. Um,
And the priest doesn't trust the police. Okay.
I know.
But whatever.
And so he only tells him it's like, he's like, well, it's an artifact. And he's like, an artifact from Northern Italy, the Cathedral of
From
St. John the
St. John the
Baptist.
Baptist
And
Cathedral.
then Harry shows he's a great detective because he's like, you're looking for the shroud that Jesus was buried in?
The Shroud of Turin.
And he's like, yes, I am. And so it's gone missing. And he is like, well, he kind of talks about how like that's almost magical and it's going to
Yeah,
be
he's like, it
vital
probably
to the
has
church.
significant importance in terms of like its magical properties.
Yeah. And so he gets information from Father Vincent and he heads out to do some detecting work. And when he gets home, someone is at the door ready to attack him, but before they
There's
can,
like somebody thumping down the stairs or something like
yeah,
that.
and like
Shadowy figures.
somebody like runs into the person who's there and they flee. And the person standing there who saved Harry is none other than Susan.
She's
Uh-huh.
in jeans and a red leather jacket.
She's
Hottie
gotten a
McHotterson.
hottie upgrade because she's of the red court, so she has to wear red.
And
Uh
now she's got that. What is it again? That
the
they're like
venom.
venom that's
Yeah, the
like
way
their
if you
spit.
lick someone, you love them.
Yeah, their spit
Um
is toxic. Well, not toxic, it's intoxicating.
intoxicating. And so she like walks in, Harry starts kissing her, and well, because she says that it was
Well,
someone from the Red
Dresden
Court who
says that
attacked
his
him.
brain locks up staring at his former lover and he smells a new smell on her.
I was like, well, he smells vampire. Then we get a rundown of what his apartment looks like again for the
Oh, yeah.
18 millionth time. Um,
But there's new additions every time because now there's Star Wars posters.
I think he
There's
had Star Wars
an
posters
Elvis
before.
poster. Did he have an Elvis
I don't
poster?
know if he had an Elvis poster, but I remember the Star Wars because he was like, I'm
Okay.
nerdy, Star Wars. And it's like, sure,
But
Dresden.
also he has an interest in music, but a specific type of music.
50s.
Elvis,
Yeah.
which all the
Um,
cool people like only
Again,
Elvis.
as he gets older, this gets less okay. Like he's like 27 or 28 in this book, and I'm like, sir, have some self-respect. Like
Well,
you can
I don't
only
think there's anything wrong with this, but it's just like I feel like I feel like as I'm reading each book, it's almost like we're getting more and more additions to the descriptions of the apartment where I'm like, how many things is he adding? Does he have more hobbies and interests than we realized?
well,
Or
he doesn't
is
talk
he
about
just
them.
right? How does he have time to watch Star Wars and listen
He's
to Elvis?
he's writing pamphlets.
I thought he
Um,
couldn't use technology. How is he listening to Elvis?
I don't, it's probably old
How is he
technology.
watching Star Wars?
That is true. Like it has to be really boring to be a wizard and just like sit in your own dark house
Mhm.
with nothing but
Like
candlelight.
books would make sense to me, but if he has trouble with even like fridges that he has to use literally an icebox, how is he watching Star Wars and listening to Elvis?
I don't know. So they make out a little bit. He realizes her spit is intoxicating.
But she does push him away and she's like, "No, I can't do this to you, Harry." And he says a really funny line where he's like, "Better safe than exsanguinated."
Oh, Laura. And so they kind of chit chat a little bit. She tells him that she came to warn him about the Duke and his plan, how he's one of the worst of the worst, and he can't beat him. And Harry's like, look, they threatened people I loved. I'm just Harry Dresden. This is just what I do.
I'm just
Um,
doing my job,
and she
protecting the
says
people of Chicago.
she admits that she's quitting her job, which means something big's going down because Susan is a career woman and she would
Yeah, she
never
is
do
so
that.
dedicated to journalism that he's like shocked. And it's like she's been gone for a really long time and not
She's been
doing any
gone for a
journalism.
year. Well, she no, she was doing journalism from afar. She was just working
Oh, yes.
remotely. And it's just like uh, part of me is like, ma'am, you went through a lot of trauma. You didn't take a leave of absence. Like FMLA
No,
exists. You could have just taken 12 weeks.
no.
But no, she's just been out and
Chicago needs
about.
its news.
Just like they need Murph. And so she's just like, well, I just came to see you. I'll touch base with you before we leave. We have to talk. And this man comes in who's incredibly beige. And Harry can only talk about how boring he
His name is
looks.
Martin.
Martin. And she's like,
And
well, we
Harry's
have to
incredibly
go.
jealous. Let's be real.
Well, and she was like, well, we're staying somewhere close. And he kept being like, we. And I'm like, Martin's standing right there. Of course, they're going to be a collective we when he's standing. Like, if Martin didn't exist in
Also,
this scene, yeah, that's suspect, Harry. But like, it seems like Martin's just hanging out and he
he's
doesn't
just
seem to be that much of a
existing.
threat. Like,
And the way that Harry reacts is like over the top, but it almost seems like the way that they have Susan written in this, it's like, or the way that Butcher has Susan written in this, it's like, couldn't she have not like kind of dangled Martin like maybe he
yeah.
is my boyfriend, but
No,
I'm not
that
gonna
has to
tell.
be in a different scene. I mean, they made out, so it's like if he's your boyfriend, you just treated
Yeah.
your boyfriend really shitty.
But at the
Like,
same time, though, wouldn't you think there'd be some kind of introduction to like,
yeah.
this is Martin, my coworker.
I want you to start
This is
introducing
Martin.
me
I
to
just
people
met
like
him on
that.
the street.
This
Like,
is
what?
Hannah, my coworker.
Well, people don't just like
I
randomly have
know.
like introduce someone and not like mention the association.
I know.
You know what I
No,
mean? Like if
Martin's
I
just
introduce
there.
like a relative of mine, I'm gonna be like, "This is my sister," and give her name. I'm not just gonna be like, "This is so and so." Like, okay.
I'm gonna start doing that. So anyway, she leaves with her boyfriend Martin, and then Harry gets a call from the county morgue, and Murphy
Well,
says
it's from
she
Karen Murphy.
Karen Murphy, and there's a dead body there, and he has to work pro bono on this
Yeah,
because
she's
he
like, Can you
cares.
do you want any pro bono work?" Like,
And it's like
okay.
they've really locked down the money because they found out that they're hiring a wizard left and right who
Hmm.
people end up murdered around. So they're like, maybe don't have that guy on the payroll anymore. And so Harry hasn't had as much work with them lately. So he goes down, he kind of gives her the rundown of what happened with
Hmm.
Susan. And Karen's like, well, tell me a little bit more. And he's like, I can't trust you with everything.
I will say at
Um,
the beginning of this chapter, these are like the type of openings to chapters that I really appreciate, where Butcher like gets a little bit reflective and he's talking about morgues and being under the earth and how constructs remind us that we're alive and everything. And I'm like, this is where Butcher's like introspective
Shines.
writing really shines. I appreciate those. I and this is why I'm like, he should do a lit fic because it would be interesting.
Well, I don't know because he also has a man named Waldo Butters in
Waldo
here.
Butters. Someone will have to come up with the character names for him, but otherwise he would probably do well at a lit fic.
The way Laura, guys, we find each other very funny, but the way Laura can turn on a dime when I make like a random comic and like, well, he also names a man Waldo Butters. Well, we would have to get someone else in there to do the name. That's
I've thought
good.
this through, Hannah.
Yes, you have. And so Waldo Butters is the coroner, and
Yeah, mine says
he
Waldo Butters hilarious.
and we found out that like he used to be the main person,
Okay,
but
this is quite sad.
I know he identified the vampires in 2 books ago, and everyone was like, well, he's gone insane. And they like institutionalized
He's like
him.
really good at his job and he starts noticing like, oh, there's something magic going on here. And he's like, this has got to be vampires or something. And they're like, this guy is
Is insane.
not right. So they put him in a mental institution,
Right.
proclaiming that the bodies weren't human. And then he gets out because they're like, I guess this wasn't substantial for us to do this
I guess we
to
should
him. And
lock people
but you
away.
know what we're going to do? We'll put him on the night shift to punish him. Like,
Right. It's so weird.
okay.
And so they show Harry the body, and it's like this body that has like it's covered in cuts, but they find out that that wasn't what killed the person. It was like
Well, it's
a
like a
bunch of
grid
different.
pattern, and then also the limbs are cut off. It's
Oh yeah.
disgusting.
And so he said that the guy like didn't bleed out. He actually died from all of these different diseases, like the
Like
plague
all sorts of diseases that would
and
almost be unheard
smallpox.
of.
Yeah. And so it's probably some type of magical thing.
Hmm.
And Harry sees like a faded green ink in this in a symbolic open eye, and it looks almost
Like an Egyptian.
Egyptian, but he doesn't really know what it is. Um, and so they said that like he probably died within hours of catching this. And Harry also was like, so why are we all standing here? And the guy's like,
Which
oh,
was a good
don't
point.
worry about it. We got masks on. It's fine. And I'm like, no, I feel
And
like
he's
you guys
like,
should be in
"Oh, I already
hazmat
checked.
suits.
None of these are airborne." I'm like, really? Okay.
Um, and
The plague
so
I thought was airborne, but whatever.
I don't know. And so they say that like the higher ups are in town, so they have to be a little bit more careful with this one.
Yeah.
And they don't want it to just be some kind of demon, like they think the brass will come down on them. And so
Well,
Harry's like,
and then like Murphy's kind of questioning Harry on like his current case and
yeah,
he's like, I'm not going to tell you everything because usually I do that. And I'm like, first of all, no, you don't. You keep so
you
many
never
secrets
do
from
it.
her. And he's like, but you should check into Interpol in case you want to get a little more info about my current client.
Which is
And
like,
it's like,
well, she's gonna know exactly what happened then. Like
right,
you gave her the biggest clue.
that's a huge clue.
And so Harry goes to leave, he goes to the car, and all of a sudden he is attacked by a
A
bear-like
bear that's not a
creature,
bear.
but it has like 6 legs. It has a
Yeah.
pair of ram's horns.
Hmm.
It has an extra pair of eyes. It's right out of the horror novel. And so it starts fighting Harry. And
And then he
Harry
like almost
is
immediately soul gazes with it, and it's like terrifying.
well, and it's like this man who's being crucified
Yes.
and is like old, like is very thin and like has obviously been tortured. And so Harry's like, oh my gosh, I've never been able to soul gaze like a creature like this. And so he's trying to fuego, he's trying to get everything done. But he kind of starts losing.
Hmm.
And
Well,
all of
and
a
then the
sudden,
creature like forces him out of his mind too.
yeah, it's right. And it says like get out. And so
Mhm.
all of a sudden there's a man there who's helping Harry, and he's like an older
He's a
gentleman.
stereotypical, like
He is a very
magical
stereotypical.
old Asian man who is
And
named Shiro.
I don't love the voice that James Marsters used
No,
for
no,
him. It is
no.
also incredibly stereotypical. Um and so the guy comes out, he's like, hold this, and he starts cutting at the demon or whatever it is with the sword that Harry's
Yeah, they're
like,
calling
oh,
it Ursil, which of
yes,
course
Ursule.
bear.
And the bear like creature is talking to them and saying like you have no power, you're too old,
Hmm.
all these things. And then another man comes in here. He is a black man who is Russian. And they all
It's like,
have
is it like Sunya or something like that?
yes, Sunya. And they all have swords just like Michael. So of course,
Hmm.
Michael has to show up. And they all fight
Of
off the
course.
bear and they kill it and it like turns into the man that Harry saw again with
Hmm.
like this little creature crawling off of it, which is like really dark and ugly and gross.
Hmm.
Um, and so they all introduce themselves, Sonia and um the other man, I cannot remember his name, sorry, uh
Shiro, yeah.
Shiro. And then they
My
all
note says I'm a sucker for Asian mythology and books, but he will do this poorly.
yeah. Um and so they're all like, "Hey, we came to warn you that there are more where this came from, 29 of them, and we think they're after you, Harry."
They're all after you,
So
Harry.
they all have a little powwow at a cathedral where they eat sandwiches, and Harry talks a lot about these sandwiches. I was like, "Sir, I think you're hungrier than you let on," because he keeps being like, I ate another sandwich. I ate a third sandwich. I had a sandwich with Michael so we wouldn't have to eat alone. And I'm like, Harry, I understand you're a growing boy, but you're really talking a lot about these sandwiches.
And he talks a lot about pizza and stuff in other books too, where he
Yeah.
I do appreciate though that we do get some moments where we're like mentioning some of like the necessary things that people have to do, like eat and shower,
Right.
because sometimes those are not included in
So we
fantasy
find
books.
out that like there was a partial prophecy that they didn't hear that says like Harry, if Harry goes up against these people, that he will likely perish. And we find out that these 29
Hmm.
creatures are like the fallen who can tempt beings into being like vessels for them or tools
Yeah.
for them to use. And they're worried that Harry might become one of them because they could tempt them. And Harry immediately is like, I could be tempted. It's
But
the
at the same
biggest,
time, he's also just like, don't worry about me, you guys. There's no
yeah,
way this would happen to me. And I'm like, really?
I know.
Okay.
And then he also like talks to Sonya, and we realize that Sonya is an agnostic. And Harry's like,
Hmm.
"You were given a magic sword by the Michael
By
the
Michael the
Archangel,"
Archangel, and
which
you
this entire section feels incredibly hypocritical to me because I'm like,
because
Harry,
Harry is
you
also
are
an
also
atheist, right?
yeah, like he's not religious at all. And like his thing is supposed, I guess, like if we're giving him the benefit of the doubt, Harry's thing is supposed to be like, even if I did believe in these things, I'm going to burn in hell for all eternity because of the way I live my life. And
Hmm.
so like it doesn't benefit me to believe in them. And I'm like, okay, but his whole argument of like, but you know they exist, so you shouldn't be agnostic. And I'm like, but Harry,
Yeah,
you don't do those things. So why
right.
are you bothering Sonya about this? Mind your own business.
He
Um,
also has like a moment with Shiro too, because we need character building.
yeah.
And so Shiro's like, "Why do you do the things you do? Like this
Can you
doesn't make
answer me
sense."
one honest question and then I'll tell you what you want to know?
Yeah.
I
And
hated that so
he's like, I
much.
I guess because I need the money. And Shiro's like, "Do you love money?" And he's like, "I don't know. I had never thought about why I do this before. I guess because I like to help people." I'm like, oh gosh, Harry.
I know. And Shiro is also like, don't worry about Sanya. The Lord sees with our hearts. And it's like, oh, that's such a wishy-washy thing of like, oh, what weird character building. So, but yeah, he says like, oh, I'll tell you something if you really answer me a question. Because Harry asks about the shroud and everything.
Hmm.
Um, and so Harry and Michael chit chat. Harry begs him to get out of town. And Harry's like, I can't do that. So he goes down, he has a little chit chat with it. He goes home, sorry.
Yeah, he's
He
back home
goes
and he goes down to his lab after he describes it and his summoning circle.
and he has a little chit chat with Bob where he has like, hey, maybe it's time for an exposition dump. And Bob is like,
Hmm.
sure, boss. And so Bob tells him like what to expect with the duel. Like he
Hmm.
gets to pick which weapons, the other guy gets to pick the time and location. And Harry's like, I guess noon out in an open field is off limits then.
And
Um,
I can't remember at what point when he's talking about he's either talking about like the demons or he's talking about the duel where he says to Harry, "You don't know anything, Harry. You don't even know a lot." And I loved that line.
I did like that. I thought Bob was really good in this section because
Actually, yes.
Harry first is like, hey, could you tell me about the shroud? And Bob is like, look, I can't search for that for you. I am a creature of knowledge, and that is a
Hmm.
creature of faith. We have two different like systems. I can't even get close to it. We are on different playing fields. That's not going to work. And so Harry's like, oh, okay. Well, like, can you tell me about the duel? And he's like, oh, yeah. And we find out that, like, if Harry chooses the weapon, the guy can say no to the weapon. So they're going to say
Mhm.
no to
Which
um,
doesn't
power.
make sense to me because I'm like, so do they have both have to agree? They have
Hmm.
to come to an agreement. So like if they say, no, we don't want to use weapons, we want to use
Well, I kind
power
of
or sheer
wondered if he
strength, and
could
then he can
use.
be like, okay, well, I don't want to use sheer strength, so I want to use this. Like, I don't get
I
it.
wondered if Harry is a bad strategist because like he could have picked another one that like the guy couldn't use and then he could have refused it and then Harry could have been like fine power or
Yeah, maybe.
magic and Harry's just Harry so he didn't think that far. He also finds out that he needs a second and a little bit too fast for my taste. It was really weird where it was like you have
hmm
to have a second by like the minute that you know the duel is happening. And I'm like, well, that seems unrealistic. Why are we forcing people to decide who lives and dies that fast? Um,
But he also
and
summons a homunculus inside of a Cabbage Patch doll
oh yeah.
into his summoning
Well,
circle,
that's
which I thought
before
was so funny.
he does let Bob out for the night to go look into Marconi
hmm
and have a little
And to
fun
Ortega.
and to Ortega to see what he can find out. And so he tells him to get Ulshavaris there because she's an oracle spirit and she could help him with these things. And so you're right. Harry summons her a homunculus into a Cabbage Patch doll, and the doll is so offended. Um,
It's so cute though.
and it drinks up it drinks like whiskey and tobacco, and Harry's like, I don't know where it went. It's a Cabbage Patch doll.
But then she's
Um,
also questioning like why do you do what
Oh
you
yeah,
do as a
she's the
wizard?
one who is like, you have to give me a true
And this
answer.
yeah, and this is when he's like not able to figure out his true purpose in life
Yeah,
because he's being asked this again and he's like is this some kind of death wish that I have or what's
yeah.
like going on here?
And then he says he doesn't know, and she goes, well, don't you think you should? And she's like, well, you gave me a true answer. Um, and she said,
But so
like,
then she tells him the rest of the prophecy.
yeah, and uh she said, you must hear the second half. Should you seek the shroud, you will most assuredly perish. And that's where we find out that they die. He might die. So Harry has like a little bit more of introspection where he's like, I don't know what to do. And then he
And
falls asleep.
I I was
Oh,
thinking that like the meaning of the prophecy was like all of those knights will die.
mm.
Which is why they are personally like, no, you stay out of this. He it was like if he let me see here. The
Oh,
prophecy
if
saying
you
that he
do
would
not,
perish
if
and
you
that
do
Harry must
not,
seek
they
out the other
all
part of the prophecy.
die.
Yeah, if not, they all die in the city with them.
Yeah. So he has to seek it. So it's not that they're
Yes.
worried about their own death. They told him not to, but I mean, they could be self-serving where they
I
thought
thought it
that
was
would
maybe
fish
a
him
thing where it
away.
was like, don't get rid of all of us because who is left then to protect everyone type situation. You know what I
Interesting.
mean?
Yeah. I don't know if I read it
I
that way
could be
because like
reading it wrong.
Michael was trying to save Harry by getting him to leave town. So
But
he
also
was
Michael cares more about Harry than his own family.
he does,
So
and that drives me up the freaking wall. I get so mad at like Michael's lack of
and we
interest in any
wonder
of his
why
family.
Charity is mad
No,
all the
Charity
time.
should be mad at him. I hate that she's always like, "You're the one who does this to my husband," and it's like this is just irrationality in
Yeah,
a human
like
form.
you and Michael need to have a talk. But
Yeah, like he was out all night without Harry. It seems like he
yep,
would have been anyways. Harry
yep,
had nothing to do with it. I do like that he's like, you named a child after me. And she goes, I was drugged up. And I'm like, see,
yeah.
Michael seems abusive. Don't let him name your child when you're high on
hmm
drugs. We're not Michael stans in this house.
No, not
Actually,
really.
my Paul does like Michael, but I don't know
Ooh.
why. I know.
Mm.
Gotta get out while I still can. Um, sorry, that was a joke. Um, so he Ebenezer McCoy also calls Harry and he's like, I told the Red Council I'm gonna go tell the Red Council to stick it. And Harry's like, don't do that. I want to fight him because I'm worried about the people I love.
You skipped the part where he was making potions in the basement and he's using like basically creating a collage and he's using pictures of meatloaf and all
Oh
these things
yeah,
that he's
he
putting
was.
into his potions and I thought that was funny.
I'm so sorry I left off the funny
Because I'm
part.
like, what a like teenage girl thing to be like cutting out pictures from magazines and putting together for a collage. I
There's
mean, a
also
potion.
There's also just so much in this where like Ebenezer like, we're a long way from the farm. And I'm like, what a good way to remind us
Were
that
you
Harry used
listening
to
to
live with
this
Ebenezer.
accent?
Yes, I was.
Oh.
And so Bob comes in and he's a little worse for the wear.
Hmm.
And he says he tried to get into Marconi's, but there was magic around that stopped him.
Yeah, there's some kind of
Um,
ward or something and flames that
and then he
he
says that he did see Ortega, who has half a dozen vamps with him, maybe a dozen mortals. And so he's like, well, I'm gonna get some sleep and we gotta keep going at this. So Harry,
then somebody comes up to his apartment and he's trying to find a bunch of weapons. He's like, I hope these wards hold.
and
And
the guy
then
is
somebody
like,
knocks at the door and they're like, the archive. And
I
I
did.
immediately was like, is this Susan's newspaper? I can't remember what it's called.
It's called the Arcane.
Oh,
It's just a
totally got that
Jim
wrong.
Butcherism. How could you mix that up, Laura? They're totally different. Archive, Arcane, Harry,
Well, because
Larry.
when they're like, it's the archive, I'm like, is this Martin?
I did wonder if it was Martin. I did like
Works for the
how
newspaper?
they showed the wards because like Harry had to set up special wards because
Hmm.
Bob was out and about, so he couldn't
Yeah, and he
protect
has
the
to like
house.
blow out those flames.
Yeah, and so he has like these candles lit, and if one like gets transferred into another one, it means he's in deep shit. And then if it
Hmm.
transfers to the next one, he's in even deeper shit. And that's what
I also
happens
thought it
is
was like a
like,
neat detail that they mentioned that like daylight was a threat to him
mhm.
because it could kill him if he was out too late. And so it was like really going to be crunch time that Bob wasn't
Yeah,
back because he was like, uh-oh, daylight's coming.
actual good world building, and they made him less
Yeah,
creepy in this book.
and
So,
stakes.
so we this man shows up and he's like a huge bodyguard and he's like, the archive is here. And then we find out that it's this little 7-year-old girl
Hmm.
and we find out like the archive is born. It's like all the
It's her.
knowledge in the
She's the archive.
world. She's the archive. She's all the knowledge, all the conversations, everything in the world. And it's born from mother to daughter, on and on and on. And she's like, oh, yes, my mother perished and she's not really
Similar to
with
like
us
the
anymore.
Sandman.
Yeah. And so she says, like, her mom's not really with them anymore, but she is a part of her. So it's okay. And Harry's like, you poor little girl. And he names her Ivy because he's like, I can't call
He's
you
got to have a
Archive.
nickname for everyone,
I
which I'm like,
know.
okay. I feel like it takes away from the character though and makes it seem
Yeah.
funnier and not as like cool. I don't
I
know why I
know.
feel that
But I
way.
also think that that's what Jim Butcher is going for, is he
Mhm.
wants it
But
to be
it's
like a
one
little
thing where
bit
it's like
funnier.
they say in one sentence like, "Oh, she's the living memory of mankind," and then they're like the sum of human knowledge, and then they like dump this heavy info that her mother is in a vegetative state from passing on all of this to her,
Which
and then
which
he's like,
you
"But you
which
know
you need
what?
a
The
name.
archive isn't really the best, isn't the most catchy nickname that we could have here. You should go by Ivy." I'm like,
I
"Okay,
do
well,
like that she is a pretty matter of fact person where he's like,
yeah."
what's with the bodyguard? You seem powerful enough. And she's like, I can't reach the pedals.
She's like,
And
"I
I'm
can't
like,
drive, you dolt."
yeah, like I'm 7. And so she asks him what weapon he wants, and he picks magic, and she's like, you know he'll reject that. And he goes, yeah, but it'll give me time to figure out what I want to do. And I was like,
Yeah.
actually, even though I don't think it's smart with like he could have been better about choosing and more strategic, good on him for being like, I need more time, just pick that one and
Hmm.
let him reject it. Um,
And
and
then
then
she's
he
like,
says
"Who's
he
your
doesn't
second?
have a
You have
second
until
yet.
sundown."
And he's like, look, I don't have one. And she's like, well, then you forfeit and I'll murder you. And so then she's about to leave and
Mister comes out.
she does what Laura does when Laura sees panda bears, which becomes a little girl and squeals a little bit. And she goes,
Honestly, when I see
kitty.
most animals,
And so Harry is like, that's creepy. Like he gets really unsettled when he sees her act like a little child with the cat.
I felt
Um,
like he was like he liked it almost to see that she actually like acted like a 7-year-old.
Oh, I always thought of. Oh,
I
he
didn't
goes,
think it
yeah, it
was.
was just adorable. She was just a kid, but the other guy
Oh,
called it
okay.
creepy. And I think it is like really unsettling. If the other guy's like spending all
Hmm.
this time with her, it's weird to see her like actually act like a little kid. It's just creepy to see that happen. Those
I
like
kind of consider it like
dualities.
a sweet moment where it's like this is a 7-year-old child who has had literally all of the knowledge of the world thrown upon her, and she just gets a moment to be a 7-year-old and be like, "I like cats."
I think I read it as creepy, so I'm glad we read it two
Huh?
different ways. And so then Harry goes back to looking into things, detecting,
Calls Vincent.
and then he calls Vincent. He asks him some questions about his leads, uh, and about Marconi, and he was like, "Oh, could I get a piece of that shroud so I could try to like he doesn't want to tell Vincent it's to track it. So he's like, I want to identify if it's legit. And Vincent's like, makes sense. And I'm like, does it? That doesn't like what does
No,
Harry have special eyes? Like, what are you talking about?
and this was the point
Um,
where I put a note in where it was like, I'm worrying a little bit about the return to all the different plots, but so far I'm keeping
yeah.
things straight.
I know it does feel like it's flowing a little bit better, but there are too many plots. And then Harry calls Michael's number and
Obviously, to ask him to be a second,
he gets
because
Molly because he has no other friends
hmm.
and he wants to leave all of these children parentless.
Also, do you find this whole thing with Molly to be somewhat inappropriate?
It's so inappropriate because immediately he's like, wow, you sound so grown up. And she's like, haven't gotten a visit from the breast fairy yet. And like,
Mhm.
what?
No, she
And
says the
so
breast fairy came and everything.
oh, the breast fairy came and everything. Sorry, I
And
just
I'm like,
remember
we
that.
know that it's bad when even Harry Dresden is like, oh, well, that's uncomfortable that somebody
Well, and
mentioned that.
Harry goes, I thought she was talking about real fairies. And I was like, no, you didn't. No one
No, you
thought
immediately
that.
knew.
You immediately knew. And so she's like, well, I'll go get my dad. And then Charity picks up the phone and and she proceeds to like berate Harry about the problems with her
Mhm.
own marriage and how Michael has a higher calling and Harry distracts him and always puts him in danger. And
She's
Harry's
like, you
like,
need to stay away from him. Michael doesn't, you give Michael a mile, or Michael gives you a mile and you don't deserve an inch. And it's like, okay,
and so Harry does like tell her, like, look, I need him to
I need to talk to him. Can you give him a message about being a second in a
or
duel?
bad things will happen. And she's
And
like,
he's like,
I'll give him your message. And then he's like, well, I'm not worried, not one bit. And then he looks worried and he walks off into the distance.
mm-hmm.
And that is the end of the first third. And it's just scene setting right now. That's all that is. We have a
We
lot of
didn't end on
scene
a
setting.
cliffhanger like we usually do.
I mean, we hung on a little bit of an unresolved note where he's like, I need the
I
second. We
suppose.
know Michael's going to
Yeah.
be the second, but you don't know what's happening next. So, and
I
we
mean,
know
yeah.
I don't
We
trust
know
Father
things because
Vincent.
I've read farther.
Oh, I don't know anything because I stopped, and I don't trust Father Vincent. I'm gonna say that right here, right now. I think
I think
he's
that's a fair assumption.
shady. Um, why does he just trust Dresden with little pieces of the shroud? It's a religious relic. Like, don't you're a terrible keeper then. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
what are your thoughts so far?
I'm liking it so far. I think
Good.
that Butcher has kept up the momentum from the fourth book, and it's
Yeah.
carrying it into this one so far. I'm a
Yeah.
little over halfway through,
Oh, good.
so at this point, so I do think we are getting a little bit back to adding in some of
Yeah.
the multiple plots and maybe too many characters that we had in the books 1 through 3.
Yeah, it's
So,
getting a
but
little heavy.
again, still keeping things straight.
Yeah.
So I have my hopes.
Well, guys, let us know what
But
you're
also Michael sucks.
thinking. Yeah,
I just don't like him.
we're not Michael fans. Let us know what you're thinking about this either on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, or anywhere at OWWR Pod. That's where we are on all the social platforms, or check out what we're doing over at ourpod.com. We have some great things going on over there, so make sure you're checking it out. Also, please make sure that you're following, you're rating, reviewing, and subscribing. It's a great way to tell people about us or just tell a friend. Um,
Yeah. And
keep an
thanks for
eye out
listening
for.
today.
Thank you. We appreciate you all as we dive into the year of the Dresden even further. We only have 2 books this year left, guys. This is book
This
5
one
out of
and one
6.
more. I can't remember what the next one is.
I mean, who
But yeah,
can?
chat about us or chat to us about
Yeah.
this on Discord. And
Yes.
also, we have our Patreon
Oh,
if
yes.
you're interested in that as
We
well.
have $1, $3, $5, and $10.
And Hannah just
And
made these really cool bookmarks that are available to patrons, which are really neat.
you can order them on there, and we also printed them. So maybe someday people will get them if they enter into our giveaways
Mm,
and things like that. You might get a bookmark of your very own.
but
So
they're
make
super
sure.
cool.
I really like them. I'm very proud of them. I think our favorite so far is season 2, the Blazing Through the Poppy War one. You and I really like that one a lot.
Yeah, I like that one.
I think there's something about the font that really works, but we also like Murderbot Diaries. And I'm
Mhm.
working on season 4's Jade City, but it's hard to do a green energy when a lot of ours is pink energy, but you
Pink.
can't do
Hmm.
Jade City without a little bit of green in it. I'm sorry. It's
Fair.
just, I don't make the rules. So make sure you're joining us over on Patreon. If you do the dollar a month, it does give you access to all the bookmarks. So that's pretty cool.
Yay.
And then $3 gives you a little bit more of extra content. $5 gets you a bonus episode, and $10 gets you a mini-sode, which is how we usually say it when we do them. So make sure you're signing up for whatever you can. Every little bit helps to go support the podcast, books we buy, things like that, or, ordering bookmarks. So make sure you're doing
Yeah.
that. And join us next week as we cover chapters 12 through 22. That's 12 through 22, Laura.
What was that? As Laura leaves.
Of Death Masks. All right, bye.
Bye.